Today we're going to make all of this designed to work with Necromunda, 40k, Space Hulk, Stargrave, and using a few simple alternative parts, make it work with Dungeons & Dragons, Age of Sigmar, and even for the Mines of Moria. Gothic archways are as versatile as a gymnast in a bedroom. You know, for changing the duvet cover really quickly, obviously. I managed to cut and assemble all this in 5 hours with £15 worth of materials. Fully modular columns, walls, doors, and more, so you can start 2024 building your own homemade gaming table at a fraction of the cost of plastic alternatives. And we're going to do all this with templates, so you can do it yourself, at home. Happy belated New Year and welcome to the State of Play. Yeah, I know, I'm a bit later to the party than my YouTube compadres, but this video took longer than I expected due to school holidays, Christmas drinks, Boxing Day drinks, then midweek drinks. I didn't drink at New Year though. At least I don't think I did. I might have just drank too much, I couldn't remember if I did or not. I thought I'd start 2024 giving you something that you can make rather than disappointing you with 20-year-old models that you neither need nor want. A little bit of old world humour there. Because I still have this from 1987. There's nothing wrong with it, it still works. And this covers every race. Now I love my Necromunda terrain, for Necromunda, but it's really very Necromundery. And with the amount of money I dropped on this, it would be great if I could use it for other types of game. Sci-fi, spaceship exploring and industrial games, yes. Age of Sigmar, dungeon crawling, D&D or old world, not so much. I was genuinely curious to find out whether I could make my own set that could be industrial, sci-fi and fantasy if you just painted it differently, by maybe leaving off or swapping a few simple parts. So if you were one of the 73 people still interested in the Skavenless old world, you could at least make some modern terrain to go with your 20-year-old Tomb Kings that are now at 21st century prices. This is what everything looks like all cut out. Literally just cut and dumped on my couch. All ready to put together into cool modular terrain. Just a pile of random shapes. I'm going to cut the designs with the amazing Xtool S1, which due to its incredible safety features, I've now managed to set up permanently in this room. No more sitting in the garage with a mask on wearing glasses like the TV show V and freezing off my backside. But it's not impossible to cut this with a hobby knife, it'll just take longer. Just like my previous terrain, all the files are in Illustrator so can be printed and cut out or loaded directly into Lightburn. And just like before, they'll open in the free version of Inkscape. My goal is to always make anything I design super easy, very accessible and simple to build whilst still making them look good. Or at least not like I've raided my recycle bin and then sprayed it black. Now, I know many people will say I don't have a laser or lasers are expensive. But cast your mind back to the early days of 3D printing. Those things were really expensive and you had to assemble it yourself. And the quality was average at best. Lasers will inevitably come down in price. They already started to drop last year, but as I said, the templates can be cut in many other ways, if you're up to the task. For those of you new to the channel, this is a Games Workshop Zone Mortalis column and wall. They're great, but they're super specific to Necromunda. Now, I've used this terrain for anything from Kill Team to Space Hulk to Stargrave. I even used them to build underground shelters for Fallout and Zombicide. But it isn't really going to work for, say, Age of Sigmar. Even painted differently, there's too much specific detail. What we need is less that can be customizable to a genre. I do love it though because it's consistently one of the most versatile kits that Games Workshop makes. But with the price, the specificity, the availability and the ever-looming chance that Games Workshop just unceremoniously dumps it in the future, I wanted something similar I could make myself and tweak to cover every type of game I play. So this is the new design file for the column, smaller and its dimensions match with the Games Workshop column. It's drawn in Adobe Illustrator on an A4 sheet and is designed to be cut with 3mm MDF and kitted out with layered 1mm greyboard. The layered greyboard parts are what's often missing from bought kits as it massively increases the commercial cost. A few have started adding them now, but you'll notice the price has risen. At home, we don't have that limitation. This is basically a cube designed in such a way to hide the fact that it's MDF. All 4 sides are identical, making it super simple to assemble. Each side just slots in place. Once all the parts are cut, the easiest way to assemble this is to glue the 4 walls to the top and then glue on the bottom. You should have something that looks like this. The big hole goes at the bottom. You'd then take the 4 corner pieces and glue on the optional greyboard slightly up from the bottom. The bottom has 2 tabs, the top has 1. So glue it around here. They'll look like this. Slot these into place through the big hole and glue them in place. Take your greyboard arches and layer those onto the 4 walls. One is inset from the other to create a 3D effect. Now you'll notice when assembled, the 1mm greyboard layers now sit flush with the top and the bottom, because I scienced the shit out of this. The greyboard for the top is the exact same size as the top piece, so glue that on. This now makes it really easy to glue in the vent in exactly the right place because it just sits right in the hole. Finally, glue in the vent grill. I've left it as a separate part so you can play around with the angle. What you'll end up with is a column that looks like this. That big hole in the bottom is exactly the same shape as the vent. So you can do this. Link one to the top of another. Better still, I designed this to work with the Games Workshop columns, so if you play Necromunda, the Games Workshop ones just sit over the top of the vent and also link. They'll only work on the top due to the shape of Games Workshop vents. Sadly, there's no way to cut MDF at an angle, but with some simple angular filing and sanding here, you could get them to work both ways. I didn't bother, as I like the aesthetic of the smaller archways always being above the larger ones. Okay, so you've got yourself an industrial column. Great. That covers Necromunda in the world of 40k, Space Hulk and Stargrave, etc, etc. But what if we wanted to go fantasy? Archways still work with fantasy, so all we need to do is paint it to look like stone or carved rock, right? Well, yes, but we don't want those greyboard pieces in the corner sections, so we wouldn't add those. We don't need the bottom panel on the walls, so we don't need to etch those. And vents and greyboard on the top are pretty out of place in a fantasy setting, so we can completely replace that with another piece, something that would work as stone carved. Now, if you paint this up to look like rock or start adding fantasy elements, hopefully you can see that this one design can work in multiple genres. I've added both options to the design file so you can choose which way you want to go. Just cut out the bits you want. 2 columns fit on one sheet of A4 MDF and one sheet of greyboard, so if you consider that A4 MDF costs around £1 per sheet and greyboard costs about 43p, 2 columns will cost around £1.43 to make. I had my 6-year-old help me with the maths. I realise this doesn't include the cost of a laser cutter, but how many times have you been clickbaited into watching a video that says, make terrain for $3, only to find out you need $200 worth of tools and $50 worth of materials you don't already own? Because everybody just has 40 empty boxes of cereal just lying around. I have 2 kids, and I still only have 3 boxes. The entire set you'll see in this video was cut from 10 sheets of MDF and 10 sheets of greyboard, making the entire cost of this just under £15. This is usually the point in the video where other creators stick a sponsor. I still don't have any, so I'm going to talk about me instead. Nothing like a bit of YouTube narcissism. I noticed over time that my YouTube description box was becoming incredibly unwieldy. Every video I created would add even more product links or hobby information to that limited space. It was often taking more time to fill in that box than make a video. Nah, that's a lie. The videos take a ridiculously long time. To streamline it all, I spent Christmas building a website. Well, mostly drinking, but when I was sober enough to read code that wasn't blurry, I was building a website. And no, I didn't use Squarespace. You hear that, Squarespace? I did it myself. I basically moved everything that was in the description box to its own dedicated space on the web. You can find the site at thestateofplay.co.uk, and it looks like this. It has information about me, if you cared, tips and tricks all in one place that you might have seen in my videos, like using Lego as a dry brush palette or mixing your own layman's medium. There's stuff about my Patreon with direct links to the Patreon files I create, so the things for this video will be put in there, as well as Patreon. A bit of a gallery where I can stick photos of what I'm working on because I suck at social media, so my Instagram logins are sporadic at best. But more importantly, I've moved all my hobby product links to a kind of online store with pictures so you can see what the stuff I use actually looks like. Much better than a bunch of text links in a description box. I'll still always link the stuff I'm talking about in a video here on YouTube for speed, but now there's an easier way for you to see it and grab it. And my description box can be freed up for, well, time. Mostly time saving. I don't like typing. If I wanted to type, I'd have written a book, not started a YouTube channel. Most of the links are Amazon or Element Games where I'm an affiliate, so I may earn a small kickback if you purchase. It doesn't cost you anymore, but does help the channel out. So now everything is in one place and the URL rhymes, so it's easy to remember. thestateofplay.co.uk. Well, I thought that was useful. Anyway, let's make more terrain. It's all well and good having columns, but we all know the biggest bugbear with all these types of kits are the walls. There's never enough. If I added up all the time on my channel I've spent moaning about walls, it would probably take up 20% of all my YouTube time. Walls were literally the first thing I made when I got a laser cutter, just to fill that annoying oversight with Games Workshop kits. I've since tweaked the design because I know many of you seem to hate the fact that you can tell it's made from MDF, which is a thing, apparently. MDF hate. As before, these are just simple boxes. I'm sure I don't need to show you how to assemble a simple box, so here they are. But do remember to dry fit everything before you glue. What gives them the detail are the layered up greyboard pieces, which I've now added to all 4 sides. These glue on in exactly the same way they do on the columns, with the wider arches as the top layer. I've permanently glued on the platforms, which I'll go over in a bit. And you'll end up with great looking walls. These are obviously just base frames that you can absolutely glue on pipes, cables. It's refuse collection day, so let me just pause for a bit while they make a whole load of noise with my trash. Right, on we go. These are obviously just base frames. You can absolutely glue on pipes, cables, junction boxes, and any greebles that take your fancy for industrial terrain. For fantasy terrain, I've included all the same arches, but without the riveted panel at the bottom. Yes, I could have just asked you to remove it from the design, but I'm trying to make this easy, so I just added them to the file. If you assemble these versions, then all you'd need to do is paint them to look like stonework. Make enough of these, and you can build yourself an entire castle, or huge dungeon. I also designed some thinner walls in case people didn't want to make up the chunky ones to save on material. Now I ran out of MDF before I could make these, so I'm afraid you'll have to settle for a crude illustration of how they'll look. All the parts are in the wall design files. Hopefully you'll agree these don't really look like MDF, and once sprayed up and painted, no one would ever know what they were made of. Now the doors are slightly more complicated, but do assemble just as easily as everything else. I'm sure you're now getting the hang of how these things just layer up, greyboard over MDF. There's 2 different doors here, a large double bulkhead and a smaller half door. Both of these come in 2 parts, the frame and the door. The doors are just single pieces of MDF with 2 layers of greyboard layered to create the design on both sides. So you just glue these on in the right order by aligning them to the angled corner. The frame is completely symmetrical and you basically assemble what looks like 2 sets of little legs, like this. And then add the little piece of greyboard to hide the MDF join and create the 3D effect. Then glue these onto the base plate through the little holes. Now the door just slides in and out because that's still the simplest way to do this, by far. For our fantasy option, I've again provided alternative designs for the doors in the greyboard, so the 2 layers become wood panelling and wrought ironwork for hinges and handles. And I made a portcullis, because why not? Every building should have a portcullis. Watch the crime rate plummet. Just like before, this is 1 sheet of MDF and 2 of greyboard, and you'll get 2 of each type of door. And I've provided designs for all types of doors in the same file. The platforms are probably the easiest of all because it's basically just a bunch of rectangles cut out of MDF. Then from the greyboard, we can cut all the surface detail that just gets glued on top. In the greyboard, I've provided 3 different designs: the futuristic floor plates, stone slab work, and wooden panelling. I hope you can paint wood to look like wood because I can't stand MDF that has those pointless wiggly lines etched in. As if a few wiggly lines make wood look like wood. But adding a quick tip, standard coffee stirrers work great, and you can literally just glue on a bunch of those for wood. Those would work for the doors, the platforms, anything else you want to make wooden. A huge bag from Amazon is super cheap and they're usually the same thickness as greyboard. Or you could just grab a massive handful from your local Starbucks, when no one is looking. The platforms can then be glued on top of the walls. I couldn't really see any reason to keep them separately, so I permanently stuck them down. If you were building, say, a terrain piece out of these, then maybe keep them separately at first to see where you wanted to put them, then glue them down. I mean, there's not a lot to say about little wooden squares with bits glued on top, so let's move on. Now, I only made one type of stairs, for now. I'm sure in the future if people wanted them I could make some stairs that go around corners. It'll just take a bit more maths to get those to work. So right now I have a straight stair. You may have seen a similar one in my first laser video, but this one has now been modified so you can get a model's base under the step, depending on how much stuff you've stuck on your bases, of course. You can have your minis halfway up a staircase with this one, because you know mini games have to imitate real life, where we all often have to stop halfway up a staircase to wait for someone else to have a turn. I've also made the handrails as one piece this time, rather than broken parts, so you can decide how you want to break them, if at all. Assembly is super simple because you literally just glue the steps to the zigzag parts. I'd recommend gluing the top and the bottom step first to form the shape. The one thing to keep in mind is the top step is larger because that's the one that creates the friction clip at the top of the stairs. I've added some leeway into the friction clip because adding paint adds extra thickness. So if you throw caution to the wind, ignore too thin coats and caked it on like the makeup you see at the big market in Newcastle on a Saturday night out, it'll still work. There's two different designs of steps, industrial and wooden, but again, coffee stirrers, however you acquire them. I didn't bother making elevators because I found over time when I put a table together, I never really bothered using them. Just use ladders. Seriously, just use ladders. No terrain set is complete until you've got some ladders and railings. One to climb up and another to fall over. The ladders are based on the ones I made for my Eden Prime colony, which you can find in this video here, but these are modified so they will clip onto the platforms. They made of 3 simple pieces that just glue together, and one A4 MDF sheet gets you 16 sets of ladders. There's 2 types, one that clips and one that just hooks over a column. The railings, however, are different, and the only part in this kit where you'll need some other material. You see, I wanted my railings to look a certain way, with the actual railing part not being MDF. MDF railings are, let's be honest, a bit crappy looking. So I designed them to incorporate some plastic rods. They're built in 4 pieces that glue together, and then you can thread some plastic rod or anything that's 2 mm in diameter through these little holes. I picked up this plastic rod online for about £2.50, but cocktail sticks would probably work with some fine sanding or thicker paper clips. Oh, and in case you wanted them, I made a design for the ladders to match the railings, so you can use 2 mm rod to make the rungs. I didn't bother because this video took long enough to make without threading and gluing 10 rungs onto a bunch of ladders. You can do that. I think they make much better looking railings this way, and these can now clip onto the platforms. One A4 MDF sheet will get 29. The world of fantasy doesn't really have railings unless they're made of rope, so you could spend a load of time threading string through the railing holes, but seriously, who's going to do that? Instead, I made these things, which work much more like large arrow slits in castle walls. I think they make better additions, and these also clip onto the platforms. You can always glue these on permanently if you were building, I don't know, an actual castle with this kit. Tiles, right, tiles. Now I have a battle mat that I use for my foundation, but I figured some of you may want tiles. So the easiest way to do this was to make 6-inch tiles because they fit on an A4 sheet, which almost all laser cutters can handle. But you can only get 1 tile on 1 A4 sheet, so you'll need to cut 4 to make a full tile. However, in solving this limitation, I discovered that I really do prefer 6-inch tiles. They're actually much more versatile than a 12-inch counterpart, and the storage of these saves so much space. If you really want a 12-inch square, you can cut it by hand out a thick card and then glue on the greyboard bits needed. It'll still work that way, just make sure it's exactly 12 by 12, or adding columns and walls will go out of whack. The extra space on the MDF sheet I filled up with extra platforms, but if you were cutting this, you could fill that space with whatever extras you liked. More stairs, more ladders, you get the drift. These are super simple MDF squares with etching, so you can easily locate the vent when gluing, which is also on the sheet. If you wanted more detail in 3D relief, the design also comes with a greyboard design that glues on top, where, just like the columns, you can drop the vent in exactly the right spot. But you can use them both ways. paint the flat etching, or add the greyboard and then paint. I also decided to do a flat tile without a vent because sometimes you might want to create a bit of terrain that doesn't revolve around a column. Pretty much why I use a battle mat. You would then place these on your table separately, or if you wanted, glue them all together into one 12-inch tile. It's up to you. Mini 6-inch tiles are much easier to store away. I also provided a gridded 5x5 option for the fantasy fans among you, both as an etched only version and a set of greyboard tiles that glue on top. And again, I made a version without the connector for the column because sometimes we just want huge rooms to house massive dragons. Obviously this doesn't use a vent because that's not very fantasy, so I replaced it with the same raised dais I used on the fantasy columns. This fits 25 and 32mm bases really nicely and acts as stone tiling. It's all a little perfect squares right now, but there's nothing stopping you from going at it with some sandpaper or some tools to rough it up for a stone floor. Now the columns you have will sit over the vents or the dais to stop them from sliding around. Then add the doors, walls, railings, ladders, and you've got a table you've made yourself. If you want more of all these pieces, you can just cut more out. All the previous bits are the main components of this DIY set, but if you've watched any of my previous videos at all, you'll know I'm never happy with a halfway house. I need walkways, I need archways, I needed some extra parts just to give this more versatility. I'm sure I don't need to show you how to build these now as they're super simple and you can't go wrong. They can only go together one way. Jigsaws for 3-year-olds are harder than these. So I added a standing walkway which just requires platforms on top, so pick your poison for fantasy or sci-fi on those. There's a simple walkway that just connects between two columns here at the top. And for these, I've created a wooden pattern as well as the industrial floor plates. But remember that coffee stirrers will work really well. By far my favourite are these archways, which match the design of everything else. I love solid walls and climbing ladders, but often just need access to a big hole. Don't we all? These, like the walls, are an MDF shell with greyboard to hide the MDF joins. The one last thing I created were what I've called column toppers. Effectively, these let you create barricades at the top of columns. It's made in 5 parts that don't need to be glued together, so you can decide how many sides you want to put in depending on where your walls join. And it comes with a greyboard floor where you can cut down these lines and glue on depending on how many sides you have on your topper. It's a really simple addition I've designed to be genre agnostic, so it'll work as barricades in both fantasy and sci-fi games. It also looks a bit like the top of castle turrets, so you can absolutely build a castle. I wasn't lying. Combine it with the portcullis and it works even better. Now the smart ones among you will have noticed I said Mines of Moria at the beginning of the video. Just keeping you on your toes because we all know dwarves don't use curved archways. So I made a set of angular designs for dwarves and all those races that haven't figured out how to use a set of French curves yet. When you're cutting parts, you just duplicate and replace all the curved bits with these. This will give you a much more angular set of terrain. Don't say I don't cover all bases. And if you wanted different designs, then these are all the parts you'd need to modify. All the hard work is already done for you. I like simple. I love modular. And with this, I now have godlike control over what I can build. Adding the slightly differing design to make them either sci-fi or fantasy now lets me build a table for Necromunda, or a dungeon, or a small scenario for D&D. Okay, that should be everything for now. A new edition usually pops into my head and I often tweak the designs over time anyway. This stuff is designed to help you fill out a table with parts you have control over and can make yourself. All dimensionally identical pieces that will go together to create an awesome looking modular table. Not including the price of the laser. For about £60 in materials, you can make a super dense 2x2 table on multiple levels. Depending on what parts you cut, you can make it work for a maze-like industrial zone, a sci-fi spaceship interior, a fantasy dungeon, or a medieval castle. Just cut out the bits that work for what you're playing. And no, this is never going to have the level of detail of a plastic kit or a 3D printed set of terrain, but this all took me less than 5-6 hours to cut and assemble for less than £15 in materials. I'll be adding all these files to my Patreon with links on my new website to the Patreon shop, which hopefully you'll check out when you have some time. Remember, it rhymes. thestateofplay.co.uk. And no, you don't have to join my Patreon to get access to the files. Anyone can access the shop. Although, consider it. It'd be nice to have you there. Let me know in the comments if there's any additions I can make to this set. Thanks as always to my amazing patrons, and I'll catch you next time. Oh, and if you're new to the channel, you can see my previous terrain designs here, based on the fantastic game Mass Effect.